I started to have this voice in the back of my head that started to say, who would ever know? You could get away with this. And the fact that that thought even crossed my mind felt very uncomfortable.
Hey there, it's Julie. Welcome to Uncomfy. A lot of us are struggling right now with how to stay open to others when we seem to be living in different realities. I feel kind of like I'm always walking on eggshells with people, but I also don't want to give up on connection. This is a podcast about staying with the moments we usually want to escape, the awkward ones, the tense ones, the ones that can actually teach us something. So let's get uncomfy.
I was feeling concerned because I realized that I was capable and almost willing to do something that deep down I knew was not the right path for me.
Friends, I want you to meet Christian Carmody. He is a PhD candidate at the University of New Hampshire. He's getting his PhD in education, and in particular, he's looking at the habits and the character that students bring to their learning experience. So keep that in mind. It's going to be important as we have this conversation. Christian, welcome. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm kind of on pins and needles. So what was it that you were wanting to do but knew wasn't the right path for you? Take us back to that scene, that moment.
Yeah, so I was working on a paper in my PhD program, and I saw the news story that had come out around ChatGPT. And I was aware that artificial intelligence was a thing. I wasn't sure what ChatGPT was, so I did some investigating. It was catching me at a very vulnerable state because at the time I was working on my PhD. I was a graduate assistant making no money, the bare minimum, which meant I had to work some odd jobs as well. I was waiting tables late at night. I was tutoring multiple students. My wife and I had just had our first child. So I felt incredibly stressed, and I felt very eager at that moment to get this PhD done so that I could move on, start my career, and start providing for my family. And so when I started playing around with this tool, I thought to myself, wow, I could get this PhD done very quickly with this tool. And that was a very tempting feeling. And I started to have this voice in the back of my head that started to say, who would ever know? You could get away with this. The fact that that thought even crossed my mind felt very uncomfortable.
So you chose not to have chat, but does that mean you don't use AI chatbots at all then for any of the work that you're doing on your PhD? Like how do you draw that line, right? Because and also I'd love to have you kind of reflect on what was it that felt like, why did you feel like it was cheating? I mean, was there a rule against it?
At the time, no one knew what to make of this. I think everyone, especially at the university, and still to this day, are scrambling to figure out what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And do I use the tools to answer your question? Yes, I use them all the time. And I think this isn't a great answer, but I think intuitively we do know whether what we're doing is right or wrong, whether or not it's quote unquote acceptable.
You follow your gut then, or do you feel like you have a pretty strong internal conscience, like voice of conscience that you're able to follow?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But it's still, but again, there's that temptation of, especially now in schools where, and
because
you're
other
dealing
people
with,
are doing it. Like that's the thing, right? Your
That's the
conscience
thing.
is telling you don't do it, but somebody else who's getting their PhD done faster is making ample use of a chatbot to write maybe quote unquote first drafts or just outlines, right? Like where do you draw that line, and how fast, and why are you like holding yourself back when everybody else is doing it,
Yeah, I don't know. And something I was playing around with the other day, which made me have this thought, because here's the other thing. I feel like there have been use cases with AI where you think you're going down this road of using it ethically, but then something stops you in your tracks to think twice. So, for example, I'm reading Beyond Good and Evil right now by Friedrich Nietzsche, and I was struggling with the first paragraph of that book, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to get through this book? And so then I started thinking, well, something that might be interesting to do is if I were to create some sort of a AI agent that plays the role of Nietzsche, and I read paragraph by paragraph to the AI tool, and I have it have a conversation with me to explain, what were you thinking at this time? What did you mean by this sentence? And here's what's going on in our world. How does it relate to what's happening in AI or polarization and this and that?
That sounds very cool, Christian. Like, I would love that if I was having to study Nietzsche.
Well, that's the thing, right? I found it to be very thought-provoking and fun and interesting, but then something stopped me in my tracks. I noticed that as I was proceeding through the book, my first thought was, open Claude, go to that AI tool, and just before I read, just read it out loud, have it record it, send it to the AI tool, and have the conversation. And what was happening was I wasn't struggling at all through the material myself. And I was thinking, all right, I have many people that I admire, many scholars that I admire who are much older than I am. They didn't have access to these tools. But one thing I do know for certain is that they took the time to study this literature or other literature. They must have struggled through it. And now you look at the span of their career and the knowledge that they have, the connections they're able to make with it, how deep they got with it. I think that speaks volumes. And I thought to myself, well, that is really what I want as a scholar. And I want to be able to really dig as deep as I possibly can. But that's going to require a struggle on my end. And so that is an example of maybe this isn't an act of plagiarism that I'm engaging with, and I'm not using it to gain any sort of, benefit, whether it's for work or what have you. But I was robbing myself to an extent of a learning experience and being able to really struggle with it. And I'm still trying to think if there's figuring out where that happy medium is.
I really appreciate you being willing to kind of talk with me about this particular struggle, because it's one, like, you're not an expert in sort of like AI use, but you think a lot about it in terms of education and productivity and creativity. So I find this really fascinating. I think this is a conversation we need to be having more with more and more people, because the fact is that everybody's using it somehow in your life. And I find myself walking around and like judging people based on, I'll see like a Facebook post that's talking about some issue in our community, and I can tell that they used AI, or even it'll say like AI generated, and I'm like, well, then I don't think it has any relevance. Like I just want to immediately dismiss it because it's not an original thought. They just they cheated by coming up with that idea. And I'm like, hang on, okay, so but maybe there is an interesting idea that like maybe I do need to read this. And so I guess the question that I have for you is, have you changed your mind about AI, right? Like if you were in that moment today, where you were 3 years ago, knowing what you know now, would you make a different choice, do you think? Would you be like, all right, I am going to use AI to like write this chapter for me?
You know what? In that regard, I haven't. I think I certainly use the tool as a collaborator to bounce ideas off of. If I've written a draft, I first of all, I send it to my peers and my colleagues whose opinion I trust the most, who I know for a fact are going to tear it to shreds. So I send it to them. But then I also have the AI tool that I'm using do the same exact thing. But then more importantly, and this is where I would put this into schools as well, is that intellectual autonomy, as far as, are you the one making the judgment call? Are you the one whose opinion or point of view is being put on the paper? Or are you just leaning on this tool or your peers? But I will say, Julie, in this moment, you actually changed my mind about something.
Oh, really?
Yes, you did.
Tell.
Yeah, you mentioned something about how when you see something online that's clearly written by an AI, there's a dismissal of it. And that is certainly my gut reaction too. And I think it's, on one hand, there's an honesty component to it. And it makes me question who's competent and who isn't. And that's something I'm very concerned about moving forward. Will everybody just be masking competence? Now, that being said, where did I start to change my mind about things? What do you do with an idea that is actually potentially profound in something that somebody has put out there that was produced by AI? So maybe they plagiarized the entire thing, and the idea is not their own, they're taking it as their own, but there's a kernel of truth there, and there's an idea that is actually profound and impactful. And something we often come across in the intellectual virtue literature, civil discourse literature, is encouraging people to avoid entering an ad hominem fallacy. So making sure that when you're engaged in an argument, you're picking apart the idea. You're not attacking the person. So maybe you enter a room and you see someone with purple hair and they're dressed a certain way, and you immediately tell yourself, I'm not going to listen to this person. I know exactly what they're going to say. But that would be committing an ad hominem fallacy. So I wonder if we do the same thing with people using AI, even if they're using it dishonestly. And when you brought that up, I started to think, I don't know what to do with that, because even though you're encouraged to separate the person from the idea, can you actually do that? Or do you just focus on the idea and don't worry about, that person did what they did, they have to live with it, and you don't have to take their word for, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
I tell you what, Christian, I want to go have this conversation with a bunch of people in my life. Like, I'm actually really, really curious to know how other people are perceiving and valuing and judging information when they know that AI was involved, right? Because maybe we do get to a world where everyone, that's what we expect and that's what we're valuing. And so if you don't show up with that level of, quality, then you're not, you don't get to sit at the table. I don't know.
Yeah, it's, so first of all, I don't know if you saw that recent New York Times experiment where they put up 2 essays and had people decide which essay they preferred. Oh. And by a slim margin, a little over 50% actually preferred the AI version. Yeah. But they didn't tell them up front which one was AI.
You didn't know which one was which.
No,
Yeah.
so that was interesting.
Yeah.
But to your point, like, what happens when we get to a world where that's just the norm, we accept it. And on one hand, as we enter a more polarized world where everyone is speaking a different language, and you then marry that with AI, where there's the capabilities to misrepresent the information through deep fakes and disinformation, I do believe we slowly start to enter a world where we really crave certainty. We really need to know exactly what's happening, because we don't know who to trust anymore. I can't trust the person on LinkedIn. I can't trust the news. And that's where I worry that AI becomes that God-like figure in our society, where not only are we dependent on it for work because it will make us look productive, it'll get us that raise, it'll get us the promotion, but now we're using it for spiritual guidance or mental health, and its word is above anything else. And for our students, if they approach it that way, perhaps their capacity to really think for themselves becomes so eroded that they become domesticated by that tool. They have to use that tool because they no longer can think for themselves. But now you're relying on the decisions of a tool. It's no longer your path or vision or goal.
Well, and I mean, you're pursuing a PhD in education. I presume you think about this a lot in terms of higher education, and, schools are all grappling. I think, wasn't there some viral video that went recently where some kid, he was walking across the stage for, I don't know if it was high school or college graduation, and he's scrolling through all of the essays that ChatGPT or whatever, some chatbot, he's like, I got my degree and I used chat or whatever. And everybody's like, yeah, that's awesome, But then on the other hand, you also have people who are speaking at college graduations and getting booed when they talk about AI being the way of the future, right? Like, I guess all of that is just to say it feels very confusing and we're all kind of making it up as we go along. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think should be the right use for it in education.
Yeah, I think about this often now that I have a 3-year-old son and I have a 3-month-old too. And God knows the world is going to look very different 12, 13 years from now. So, but I often think about them as far as what I hope their education experience looks like. I think the reality is the train's left the station. It's not stopping anytime soon. This is going to be a part of their lives and everyone they interact with. So when we're talking about using these tools in schools, I believe there needs to be a foundation of intellectual character building before students even get involved with these tools. So intellectual character, think of it as a sibling of moral character. So when we think about courage, you often think about the person who's coming in to save the day and they're risking their lives for someone else, and that person is seen as admirable to their fellow citizens. Intellectual courage, on the other hand, is having that willingness to speak your truth despite what consequences may follow, especially if the benefit to you and society in general doesn't come till later on. So with these AI tools, I think going in with that framework is really important. So having students understand what it means to be intellectually humble. What does it mean to be honest as an academic? What does it mean to intellectually persevere through something? And if they have that framework in mind, I do think it would significantly change the way they approach these tools.
Christian Carmody is a PhD candidate in education at the University of New Hampshire, and he's a senior researcher at the nonprofit Research Institute for Learning and Development. Christian, this has been so interesting today. Thanks so much for your time.
No, thank you, Julia. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
And thank you for getting uncomfy with us today. Have you been wrestling with some of these questions about AI? I'd love to hear your thoughts and how it's affecting your interactions with other people, your ability to do your job, and how your conversations and disagreements about this are going. Email uncomfy@byu.edu or find us on social media. We are at uncomfy.podcast on Instagram. Let's keep the conversation going. Uncomfy is a BYU radio podcast. Samuel Benson produces it, and the team includes Maggie Mathis and Abby Karras. Our theme music was composed by Kelsey Ney. I'm Julie Rose. Can't wait to get uncomfy with you again next week. Before I leave you, I want to recommend another show from the BYU Radio family of podcasts that I'm pretty sure you're going to love. It's called Constant Wonder, and it consistently, or should I say constantly, ranks near the top of Apple's nature podcasts in their rankings. But Constant Wonder is about more than just nature. It's about finding awe in everything around us, including our own backyards. So on the show, you'll hear guests share stories of spiritual encounters with nature, of real-life accounts of human kindness and bravery, like a doctor on a quest to bring care to the homeless. See the world with new eyes as host Marcus Smith invites us to find wonder in every corner of life. Listen to new episodes of Constant Wonder every Wednesday on the BYU Radio app or wherever you listen to podcasts.